This company seems to be long forgotten. I don't see any little historical stories written about them online anywhere. Nothing at all, anywhere. Even searching Ancestry, it was really hard to crack this story. I spent a solid 8 or more hours trying every lead I could think of, and honestly, I thought about putting this thing away because there just wasn't anything out there to find. The problem was that there were multiple people in the area with the same names, and it wasn't clear who was who. The story finally started to unfold whenever I got into the newspapers, and then I found so many articles I didn't even use them all. So I organized them chronologically, and let's see what we can find on this episode of Antique Bottle Stories. Bankers Inc. was run by 3 brothers. Charles, otherwise known as Carl, which really threw me through a loop because there were multiple Charles and Carls. Then we have John D. and Frank. The Nelson brothers were born in the 1860s and the 1870s in the Midwest. Their parents are Swedish immigrants. In fact, everywhere I found in these records with the last name Nelson were from Sweden, so I wonder if they were mostly from the same family. Anyways, the family settles in Kansas City, Missouri. So let's start with the earliest record. In 1900, I'll just show you what I keep running into. Here's John D. He's running a Swedish press, but then there are 10 Charles Nelsons and 4 Franks, and I don't know which ones are ours. The first time I can see anything about Bankers Inc. is in 1903. It says, Frank Nelson wants to run for congressman in the 7th District. Nelson already has taken quite a boom without having committed himself. But Mr. Nelson won't have to depend on politics for a living. He and his brothers, C.O. and J.D. Nelson, have engaged in the manufacture of ink in Kansas City. They placed Bankers Black Ink on the market in September. So now we have a start date of September of 1902. The firm is known as Bankers Ink Company. So back to this one in 1903, we see that Frank is the president, Charles is the treasurer, and John is the manager. It says, manufacturers of writing inks, fluids, mucilage, cream mucilage, and glue. This is also from 1903. It's a complete list of supplies and prices. And here's another full-page ad for Bankers Inc. This ad in May 1903 says, the Bankers Ink Company is giving the old ink factories a merry race, and its president is Honorable Frank Nelson, ex-state superintendent of public instruction of Kansas. John is the manager, and Charles is the secretary. It says the Bankers Inc. only makes one grade, the highest. Here's June 1903, a testimony. The Shawnee State Bank had been using this ink since February. There was a flood in which all their books were in 5 feet of water and mud for 6 days. But when they pulled out the books with the Bankers Ink, the accounts were clear and looked as though they had never been touched by the flood. The ink did not fade out or blur in the least. They said, in fact, it was clearer and brighter than before. It says the bankers were loud in their praise of this ink. December 1903. A few little snippets saying Bankers Inc. is awesome and that you should get some. And a little snippet about Professor Frank Nelson is giving some lectures this week. So these were all in 1903. So they did quite a bit of advertising this first year. So now we're up to 1904. Professor Frank Nelson is kept pretty busy these days making commencement addresses. It says he's one of the most interesting speakers in the state. At the end of 1904, Bankers Inc. receives great recognition at the World's Fair in St. Louis. The brothers were agreeably surprised to learn that this ink had been victorious in the face of strong competition from other countries. It says the award received is a great credit to our Swedish manufacturers in this city. Bankers Inc. is now acknowledged to be the world's best writing ink, and we are confident that the honor will always be maintained. So that's a pretty big deal. Here in 1905, let's look at the address. It says 116 West 6th Street. Well, I googled it and it brings me here. So it doesn't seem to be standing anymore, or the numbering has changed. But this building over here is 206th Street, and this whole empty lot takes up the 100s. Here's a 1905 testimony in the paper. The clerk of the circuit court, Mr. Patterson, decided to test the inks of 3 competitors, bankers being one of them. He wrote a line on a piece of paper with each of the competitors, and then he left that paper out on the windowsill, exposed to rain, snow, and sun for 3 months. The results were clear. Banker's ink held up much better than the other 2 inks, to which he said, "This ink undoubtedly is the best ink." Here's a 1906 article stating that the ink sales this January were 112% more than last January, and February sales were 367% more than last February. Frank is still running around lecturing as of April 1906. He had been in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Someone says, "Many lectures have been given in this city during the winter season, but none more scholarly and finished, nor delivered in a more masterly manner than the one given by Frank Nelson at Northwestern College last Friday." They said they just hoped to get the privilege to hear him again. So the 1910 census, I could only locate one of the boys, John. He's 46 and he's single. In 1915, the business address changed to 604 to 606 Wyandotte. So I went to go see where that is. And wouldn't you know, it's that same corner. That building that's the 200th 6th Street, that's also 600 Wyandotte. So I thought maybe this might be the building after all. In February 1915, we see a little bit about John now. It says that he was the editor of the Lindsberg News back in the 90s. It says, John spends most of his time out on the road, marketing to the big businesses. Here's a clip of his newspaper. It's an article about his brother Frank, and it's written in Swedish. I didn't realize how much the Swedish presence was in this area during this time. Here's the 1920 census with John and Charles rooming together. Both are single and both are in their 50s. And here's the 1920 directory. It shows that Frank lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Here's a 1923 article talking about their 20-year anniversary. Skipping ahead to 1930, Charles and John are still living together. Now they're living with a widow and her family. And here's a 1930 article stating that most of the writing ink is sold in 2-ounce bottles now for home use, and that they haven't been selling the big bulk bottles as much anymore. By the time we get to 1935, we only see John and Carl. I suspect that Frank has died. He would have been in his 70s. Like I said, there are so many guys with the same name that I can't find him specifically. 1939, the business is still trucking along, looking for sales ladies. By the time we're at 1940, only John is listed. Carl has died too. Then by 1943, John died. I was able to find his obituary though. He was 79, and it doesn't say that any of his brothers have survived him, so he is the last one. There's not another city directory until 1947, and there's no listing for Bankers Inc. at all. I don't think any of them had a family, so they wouldn't have had somebody to hand the business down to, and I guess none of their officers of the company took it over either. I wonder what happened to that ink formula. I mean, if it was the best ink in the world, someone should have kept producing it. The company just falls off the map after the last brother died. I didn't see where the building or the assets are sold off in the paper or anything. Nothing in the paper past 1940. Well, at least we're able to find that much of the story. I mean, I'm happy with that. So my bottle is one of the smaller bottles that they started producing in the 1930s. It has the Bankers Inc. Kansas City on one side and a sunken panel for the label on the other side. It's a cork closure. And the bottom has a ever so faint Owens mark, but no numbers are visible. So this would confirm it to be in the 30s. And that's it, you guys. I picked up this bottle several times over the past year and I put it back down because there just was nothing to find about it. But since I've got that newspaper subscription, it's made all the difference for this story. And I like the feeling that my story might be the only one out there, that maybe I've contributed something useful. And that'll do it for today, guys. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and we'll see you next time.